Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laura Mullen, and on behalf of ACRL and Choice, I'd like to welcome you to today's program, Navigating New Acquisition Models for Multimedia Content, sponsored by Alexander Street Press and featuring Zach Dorsey. Today's program is one in a series of sponsored webinars from ACRL and Choice that addresses new ideas, developments, and products of interest to the academic library community. Free to users, these structured 60-minute live presentations provide the opportunity for interactive discussions of important new issues and developments in academic librarianship by librarians, vendors, authors, and other interested stakeholders. Before we get started, I'd like to point out a few features of the webinar software. In the main area of the screen, you can follow along with the presentation materials. Along the left-hand side, you will see a Q&A panel that you can use to submit questions or comments. We will spend time at the end of the program responding to your questions, so please do feel free to submit your questions throughout the program. And finally, please note that today's program will be recorded and all registrants will receive follow-up instructions on how to access the archived version. Our program today features Alexander Street Press's Zach Dorsey. Zach joined Alexander Street Press in 2013 after spending 4 years with CQ Roll Call, a division of the Economist Group. In his role at Alexander Street, he's advocated for and launched several new acquisition models to meet the diverse needs of different types of libraries, and he's eager to hear your feedback on how vendors can improve the overall acquisition process. He's a graduate of the University of Tennessee, where he earned a degree in advertising. Now I'd like to turn things over to Zach.
Thanks, Laura. And thanks, everyone, for participating today. Just to help manage some expectations up front, we highly doubt the presentation will run the full hour, so there will be plenty of time at the end for questions, and we really encourage you to use the Q&A technology there on your screen to submit those questions. We won't answer them during the presentation, but at the conclusion, we'll be rereading those questions out to the group and answering them as best we can. So again, thanks to everyone, and apologies, there's a little logo snafu on our slides. I am with Alexander Street Press, as Laura mentioned, not to be confused with the ACRL logo on the bottom right of the screen. It's helpful to start today really by giving you some background on who we are as a company. Very specifically today, I want to manage your expectations again that we're not pitching you on any of our products or services per se. The real aim today is to help educate you and engage in a discussion towards the end about different models that are becoming available in the space with a little bit of context and experience and background from Alexander Street. So just, again, a quick little backgrounder on us. We're one of the few companies in this space. We do combine multimedia content, and we do so through our own custom technology. Both of those elements are really, really important to us. And it's a huge value add to our customer base. We are the largest provider of streaming video and music to libraries, to academic libraries. We do offer, I think as many of you are likely our clients in some form of or another, an extensive suite of resources and services. Originally, we have been around about 14 years, and we're extremely well known for our collection model, quite traditional, primarily serving the research needs of libraries. But over the last 5 to 6 years, we've really extended ourselves into some new spaces to support all different types of libraries and the growing and changing needs of the industry. And we do, I should point out, offer not just perpetual rights, what we call purchases. We also offer subscription models, and we'll be talking a bit more about that today as we go through the presentation. So without further ado, I wanted to kind of kick things off today. I thought it would be appropriate to really kind of share back to you what you and other of our customers are telling us. There's so much change we hear and see happening in the library space. I think we all get a little chuckle out of the first bullet, hopefully, unless there's a lucky few of you out there. It doesn't seem that many library budgets are growing. With that, the demand for digital content is, and we just can't get over. We do so much research, particularly over the last year. And there's an amazing amount of students and faculty that really want to get their hands on digital content. And in many ways, we have, at least with our customers, seeing a big migration away for some of the more text and journal-type products to a certain extent. And specifically, when we hear the digital request, it's video, and more video. And certainly that's one of the main things we do at Alexander Street Press. It's not the only piece, and we will be discussing some of the multimedia components later today. And the biggest thing we've really noticed, and I would actually kind of nail this down really in the last year, the demands from the library community, really all of you, is there has to be a change in how we adapt the models and giving flexible options to you. And sometimes that means things change on a year-to-year basis, where some years it makes a lot of sense that you want to be in a type of patron-driven model. In other years, you might want to revert over to a subscription. At times, you want to convert that subscription to a purchase. And the key thing for us as a vendor in this space and our other vendors that surround us as well is making sure that we have those flexible and adaptive options, that we give you what you need when you need it, because things are changing for you. And it's so important for our mission that our customers, that we change with that need. At the end, the last bullet is really what we're going to try to spend a large chunk of our time on today, and that's really dissecting, some of the new models out there that I'm sure many of you have heard of or in different formats, but it just seems, particularly, again, to me in the last year alone, there's so many new choices, there's so many details to consume on in terms of what's right for me and when is this right for me and who does this really benefit. So the main goal of today is really to hopefully have, I'd love to accomplish this as best we can in the Q&A portion, but to have a dialogue about really what are the best models and what they're designed to do. And of course, I'm sharing that from my experience and our experience as a company here, and certainly want to get into some of those details now. We'll call this the power of choice, and I want to kind of start by explaining this slide a bit. Full disclosure, we do happen to offer options in all of these different areas. So we do have some credibility, hopefully, to explain these, or I should say we will offer. One of them is coming out later this year. But in many cases, we're not the only ones in this space, and there's other organizations, of course, that offer the same or even similar models for you in terms of how you acquire that content, or we would call really the premium content. So during the presentation here, we're going to go through now each of those different bullets, and we're going to talk a little about each in terms of who it's really designed for, what's good about it, and what might not be so good about it for different folks. We're actually going to start there at the top, and I think most customers in our space really associate collections with our company, particularly the digital variety, because that's really where we got our start. Collections, and again, forgive me for stereotyping here, best for should not be misled or misunderstood as best for everybody. But collections we found, working with our customers now for almost a decade and a half, is that primarily the benefit is typically for more research-oriented libraries. You're really looking for that exclusive. You can't get that content anywhere else. One of our famous taglines over the years has been making silent voices heard. Collections have always just worked really, really well in that space. On the flip side, we've also seen a big migration to our customers asking for more learning-oriented products and collections. So still expertly curated, but not so much in terms of trying to drive a research need, but really trying to drive that learning need for faculty and students. And the key kicker that that's coming out of our research in the last couple of years is really making sure that content is aligned to the syllabi and the learning that the professors and the faculty want to drive forward with their students and their patrons. So let's kind of talk. You'll see them on the slide. Certainly, I don't want to read the slides to you. But in terms of some of the positives here that we hear, and this is coming from our customers, not our view per se, is the expert curation. It's so important to have an expert that's looking at these products, building these collections with, whether it's being aligned to syllabi or focusing on research outcomes. That's the real main number one, I would say, almost value that people get out of collections in the space. They're also a great value, as many of you know. Not to turn this into an economic type discussion, but just the way licensing agreements work in the space with our information providers, you'll hear me refer to those as IPs during the call, there's really a great value. And what I mean by that is that typically we can deliver the lowest cost per title to you within a collection because it's curated, it's grouped that way, versus, for example, on the other spectrum where you want to buy individual titles at your leisure. So a big positive for most folks that have a collection orientation. Of course, another really, really major positive is the depth of coverage. A lot of collections out in the space, they're so specialized, they're so wonderful, they attack and really uncover needs that some research professionals and people focus more on the learning outcomes just don't have access to before. And that kind of dovetails into the last positive there. We're really, in most cases, we're bringing really hard to find or obscure content together in one place and really driving, again, in the more modern era to more learning outcomes. But again, we still do, as an example at Alexander Street Press, an overwhelming number of research-oriented products, and we'll continue to put those forward into the space. Some of the negatives for those of you that I'm sure are familiar with this model, not all titles, within a collection are going to get the same level of use, particularly the research things. Now, there's a value to that because you want to make sure you have them when you need them. But if you're tight on funds or you're in a space and you're moving more towards a demand type model, that can be a challenging rationalization for a lot of libraries to realize if not all those titles, hey, we paid for that and it's not getting the same usage across the board. For those of you that have more of a purchase orientation versus a subscription, and our collections, of course, at Alexander Street can typically be subscribed to or purchased. There are a few exceptions, of course. Perpetual rights can be expensive from an upfront perspective. Of course, after X number of years, it's a great value because at some point, the subscription, the ongoing cost of that will exceed the cost you paid in that initial perpetual year. And sometimes, because the collections, there's so many already in existence today, so many wonderful and top-level topics have been covered. Certainly sometimes as a digital publisher, we struggle even to figure out what's the next big idea and what's the next thing that we can really help support our customers with. And so sometimes you do end up where the breadth of content, so to speak, within a certain collection is pretty narrow, even though you might have that great depth in a certain area. For example, human rights, something we're working on for next year, great in depth, but great in depth, yeah, but not necessarily in breadth. So that's kind of the collection nutshell. I would expect most people are probably most familiar with this type of model, so to speak. Let's move on to something that's relatively new, and we're seeing it pop up within the space from different providers. We ourselves have launched what we call subscription channels. That kind of ties in for those of you that are already customers of those options into this kind of bucket. But of course, as the name says at the top, this is well suited for subscription-oriented customers. One of the challenges as a company, again, speaking from experience here, that primarily is focused on collections, is that we don't, sometimes those narrowly focused topics make it very hard for a subscription-oriented school to get the full coverage or the full solution within a certain area of subject matter, for example. So one of the things we're seeing a lot of interest in is folks, and our clients are telling us this, of course, is that really create a disciplined solution for me. I'm an ongoing customer, meaning I want to subscribe. I can't go out there and do perpetual rights, or I just don't want to for certain areas. How can you help me? And that's really the whole notion of what a disciplined subscription is all about. Obviously, jumping into the positives here, I've kind of already articulated this. Typically, these are at the discipline level. So, for example, one of the ones we put forward that's probably our most popular so far is business and economics. So instead of picking out things like international business or HR management or business books online, we're giving our subscription customers a way to actually get all of that content in one place and actually going to bullet number 2 here at the most affordable price. So the whole notion here, you can call it packaging, you can call it what you prefer, but ultimately it's a way to create a discipline-level solution whereby, for example, going out and getting the individual collection components would be less cost benefit to you, the library. So these we're finding, great for not just the learning type of institutions, but also, or institutions that have a learning need, but also on the research side. And the really, really fantastic thing, and this kind of dovetails into one of our benefits of our platform, we'll discuss that very, very briefly later in the importance of technology and all this, but it's the multimedia content. So, we have certain video solutions, but discipline subscriptions are agnostic to whether it could be audio, it could be text, it could be video. It's helping the students and the faculty learn or do research around and not, finding different ways to leverage those things and piecing them together in a way that really helps those outcomes. Of course, the negatives, for those of you out there that love to purchase perpetual rights to content, at this point, most of, at least for Alexander Street, these are subscription-only type models. They're not available in terms of buying them outright. And unfortunately, just given the way that product development works in any organization, we don't necessarily have coverage in every single discipline. And those are some of the negatives that you'll see, not just with Alexander Street, but other organizations that are also experimenting, so to speak, with this type of model. And again, just a reminder, feel free to log your questions as we go here, and we'll certainly come back to those or any individual slides you'd like to cover in the future. Single titles. A really interesting element of all of this. I think most, all of you on the call, I would imagine at some point have had some experience purchasing or subscribing to a single title. Obviously, DVDs have been extremely popular, and we're seeing a huge shift right now from our customers into the streaming element of that. And so when we look at things, obviously the benefits here are pretty straightforward, but it's title level flexibility. So whether you're a faculty member and you know a certain title you need for a class, it's typically within your budget to go out there and grab a couple of titles that you need. And typically, at least with Alexander Street, I know some other competitors, if you will, in our space also offer this. It's easy to do through a web interface. You don't have to go through a long, arduous process to acquire that content. The really neat thing, I think it's a huge positive, is that, given kind of I'll say this kind of generally, of course, it's not true in all cases and certainly to varying extents, there is a big shift that we see, at least with our customer base, moving away from the DVD model very much into streaming. And a big positive of the single title world still today is that we still, as one example of this in the industry, we still support both options. So we still have a lot of customers who continue to order DVDs from us, even though a lot of customers are kind of going more towards a streaming-only type model. Of course, the most relevant consumer example, Netflix, who's done a great job of kind of understanding how that transition has worked. And I'm almost seeing a very strong parallel to how we're seeing that in the academic space, at least from, again, my own and our company experience. The nice point here, too, I mean, it is the lowest entry price. Not to confuse the matter, I'll get to that on the negative side, the counterpoint to that, but it doesn't take a huge commitment to get a collection or a discipline solution. And also, like I said earlier, they're easy to buy typically through online vehicles. There's marketing that helps you kind of understand what's available. And most folks in our space, and we strive towards this as well, we try to focus our marketing on the people that really care about those particular topic areas. Some negatives here, of course, that I'm sure you're all familiar with. This does produce the highest cost per title, and what I mean by that, by packaging and things like that with our IP relationships, when you're grouping things together in a collection, for example, that we covered a few moments ago, you're going to get a better cost per title. Of course, you're not necessarily going to get the same use out of all those titles. And unfortunately, just the way the single title world works in both DVDs and streaming, working with, again, information providers, IP for short, we don't always have or are able to obtain rights as a publisher to all the titles you might want to be able to choose from in an a la carte perspective. The next model we'll cover is something we call bundles. Bundles, in many ways, to kind of keep this as simple as possible, are really most similar to the same idea I mentioned of a discipline subscription in a way. And what I'm getting at here, and we are one of the folks that are experimenting with this, I'm certainly not trying to represent us as the only folks that are doing this, but it's really a way to bring together certain titles from a single title perspective and give you a packaging type value for those. So libraries that want to purchase, rather it could be perpetual in some cases depending on the rights. It could be a subscription model, but they want a group of certain single titles that they know that they want. And of course, why would you not want a little extra financial benefit to buying those things at once? So some of the positives, let's jump right into it. There are package discounts in this model whereby the counterpoint of trying to go and get all those individual titles from one vendor or multiple vendors, depending on how the rights work, would be more expensive than just getting, for example, one set of content, for example, in the area of Asian theater, perhaps. Another huge positive is that bundles like this, at least through Alexander Street, have streaming access to them. And I would say another really great element of this is that it's exclusive content. So in many cases, and I'm kind of giving you a little bit of a window into the world of how our publishing works and some of the challenges we face that ultimately you encounter as well. Some IPs, information providers, are unwilling to give us certain rights in all instances. So we've actually had this happen the last couple months even, where we're able to launch what we call a single title bundle, what I'm mentioning here, and that includes exclusive content that you're not going to be able to get in any other model, and that's just a restriction. So sometimes things like bundles are the only way that we can give and make this content available to our customers, which is another big value add of why the model exists in the first place. And oftentimes a lot of our customers are already in the early going. We've launched 10 bundles actually recently of kind of these packs of single titles, if you will. They're really great add-ons to some of the bigger collections or discipline solutions that folks might be looking at. Of course, some of the downsides, similar to some other areas we talked about, it's not a huge swath of content. It's typically in the area of 20 to 30 titles for most of these bundles, much smaller than what you would think of as a collection. And the content breadth, of course, kind of similar to what we talk about with collections, is typically extremely focused on a certain topic. For example, John Cleese management films are one of the great titles that we're able to put forward as part of our initial release this year. Actually just came out this week, and that's a very specific set of content for our customers there. I'm seeing some questions trickle in. That's great. We're going to be addressing those once we conclude the presentation component. Let's talk a bit now, and I've talked to some of you. I see the names on the list, and I've gotten some emails from you prior to this session. I think a lot of folks are really in this discussion to learn more about our demand generation type models that are out there. Certainly, we kind of saved these for last for a reason. And there's two models here that I really want to cover in a little more detail than the other areas. One is what we call here, and there's different words for this, but EBA, or evidence-based acquisition. And in a moment, I'll also be kind of comparing this to what we call patron-driven acquisition, or PDA. Now, most of you, I think, are quite familiar with these, or at least a PDA or a DDA type model from your experience with journals and ebooks and things of that nature. Some of our poll questions, for those of you that participated up front, I saw a number of answers that people are participating already in those programs. We've talked to many of you. I think some of the names I recognize in this call during our own research efforts as we kind of look to enter into this space. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the journals and the ebooks per se. I'm talking primarily about EBA and PDA in the context of video. And I'm doing that primarily because A, a little selfishly, that's what we do. And then B, of course, that's really where some of the newness is in these types of models, a fresh take, if you will. Full disclosure, of course, we are not the only ones in the space doing these types of models for video. But I'm certainly happy to answer any questions about how ours might be a bit different at the end of the session or even offline at a later time. Evidence-based acquisition. The key thing to understand about this model, and this is our own kind of language we're using here, this is a purchase-oriented solution. So if you're looking for a PDA type solution that might include the ability to have a stream of a title on a subscription basis, this is not that. And I'll explain some of the details of this model in a separate slide. But the whole idea is that a customer is essentially working here through the EBA model to build their own custom collections of video content. We have had a really successful pilot that's been running. We just passed the year mark. A number of customers from around the world, not just in the U.S., are participating in that program, and the feedback has been tremendous. But like I said before, we don't necessarily see evidence-based acquisition as a model that people stay in on a recurring basis. It's something that our initial customers are saying, this is wonderful, we're going to step in for a year, we might step out next year and go buy some collections, or we might look at the discipline model, or we might convert something into PDA, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But the whole overview I should probably focus on this slide is that EBA is a way to build your own custom collections. It's purchase-oriented, meaning you get the perpetual rights to it, and it's video-based. Again, I have to kind of position the positives here from our own experience. I am not aware of any other organization out there that is doing evidence-based acquisition for video. There are some folks that are doing what we call kind of a PDA model, and I'll cover that in a moment. Within our EBA model, since we're the only ones that I'm aware of, and anyone feel free to correct me through the Q&A portal, that we have over 40,000 full-length video titles, not counting clips and things of that nature. So it is the largest by far of any other video provider in the academic space in the world, unless I'm mistaken, and something else has come up that we're not aware of. The really cool part about this, and for those of you that participate in journal and ebook programs, there's no trigger. And the word trigger can be sometimes a blessing for some folks, and it can be scary for others. So EBA is for folks that you care about the usage. You want to see what your patrons are using during the EBA term, but at the end of the day, you don't want to have an obligation to necessarily buy what gets used. In EBA, there is no requirement for that. So again, you're building your own collections, and the main benefit we've heard from our initial pilot customers across the globe, and this seems to be the most common bit of feedback that's super positive, is that they can support multiple departments. So it's kind of the benefit of the single title model where they can pick their individual titles. The cost per title under EBA is a better rate than you're going to get from going, for example, to our academic store. And that's a huge value because they can pick things across different disciplines and different departments using end-of-year funds to do that, as an example, was quite common for us to see last year. Some of the downsides, to be very upfront about the EBA model, it is cost prohibitive for a lot of our customers. Number one, if you're not a customer with purchase budget, meaning perpetual rights, of course, this is not for you. And even if you do purchase content, there are some, it's all relative, I guess, but the commitment levels are not teeny for what you have to put forward to even participate in the program. Now, of course, for those people that might be on the call and are in the program, when you're doing purchasing through EBA, if you're buying collections perpetually, you're probably spending more sometimes than what you might even commit to our EBA model. And at the end, the other thing to kind of understand, one of the negatives is when I say small number of titles, what I'm really getting at there is that at the end of the period, what you're actually buying, you're not picking out full collections, you're picking individual titles. So there is some type of a limitation there to be aware of for if you're interested in this type of model in the future. Let's move on to PDA and kind of draw some comparisons and kind of strike some of the differences that are really important here. PDA is something that we are not the only ones out there doing. So again, full disclosure, they are there. PDA actually is the one thing that we're talking about today that Alexander Street Press has not actually even released yet. So a little preview for those of you on the line that might be interested in the future of learning more about this. We do anticipate, no promises here, we do fully anticipate that our PDA pilot program will be available. We'll be making some selections on which customers participate as early as January 2015. So just a couple months away, and we're certainly really excited about it. But let's stay focused on the concept here. This is for institutions that are looking to subscribe or purchase. And I won't say the name, but there is a competitor in the space that has a similar model, but they do not, to the best of my knowledge, offer a purchase element to their PDA program. And I would say that the biggest difference to understand about PDA versus the EBA model I just explained is that PDA has a trigger, the EBA model does not. And of course, I think all of us hopefully are familiar with that terminology, but the trigger ultimately is after X amount of uses, you actually have triggered a subscription in our model to that particular title, or you have triggered a perpetual purchase to that title. Now, the huge benefit here is for people that aren't scared of a trigger. A lot of our customers and our clients have given us research and feedback into when we've been building this model, is that they actually like it because they don't have to be hampered down with the need to go in there at the end of the term and select the titles that get used. They like having the patrons have a say. We've heard some great feedback that it's a very democratic type model for both students, faculty. Actually, this is a bit of a conservative estimate at this point. We do anticipate our PDA model to include more than 15,000 video titles. And again, similar to EBA, it's not as large given some of the rights restrictions that we have for certain titles, which not just Alexander Street, but any publisher in the space encounters. And actually, this is a conservative number at this point. Our product manager, I spoke with him earlier today, and it looks like we're going to have closer to 19,000 to 20,000 titles available at the initial release of our pilot in January. In many cases, and I think probably any publisher has a claim to some extent, there is exclusive content that you can't get in other places. So there will be and there are titles in PDA, for example, that you might not be able to get with EBA or within a collection or go and grab a single title for. One of the most popular examples by far we've already seen that hopefully I think I can commit without having to backtrack ever, our Criterion collection that's launched just this past summer. We do intend to make that part of our PDA model for customers who are looking to not necessarily get the full collection of films, but also have the ability to trigger subscriptions to those particular Criterion films of the patron's use. Similar to EBA, the common thread is that you are able to support multiple departments. You're not making those tough choices at the end of the year to say, I have some purchase money left over or a subscription budget I need to spend. You know, who's going to get lucky and who's going to be kind of left out. This is a very democratic way, not just for the students in the library to decide what gets purchased, but also to kind of sparse that out across who gets library funds in terms of different departments and groups within your institutions. Now, the negative, and sometimes we hear so far in our research and our initial kind of beta testing that the negative we hear a little bit of is that people, they don't have the control they want. So if you're someone that loves control over what gets purchased and what doesn't, the people that are a little bit nervous about a trigger, that's one of the downsides of the PDA model, and that's why we have an EBA type system. And the other big negative from those of you that we've done a lot of research and we've talked to as we're planning this, budgeting can be difficult. It's one of those things where it's great, it's democratic, what gets used gets purchased, but in a good way, you want a lot of use. At the same time, a lot of use can mean a lot of funds going out the door in an uncontrolled fashion. And I'm happy to cover some of the ways that we're building controls into our model to help you manage that more effectively. I'm seeing some good questions coming in, and again, I promise for anyone that might have just joined the line that we will address those at the end, and I'm happy to kind of revisit any of these slides to add some context there. Let me give you, I've kind of already hit these highlights. I think it's important to kind of cover, I always get this question. I've done a similar presentation at the past two ALAs this past year. How does it really work? To give you a sense of the mechanics, for EBA, or we're going back to EBA here, the customer commits initial funds up front. So there's a certain commitment level. And based on that commitment level, that determines how long you have access to those titles. For Alexander Street, that means you get access to over 40,000 titles. And again, like I said before, there's absolutely no obligation to buy based on use. But once you make that commitment, you are required to spend those funds within that model. Now, again, this is unlimited simultaneous users on or off campus, and the really nice thing that we learned in our pilot for EBA, and I think we did this right from a very early stage, there is no setup charge and there are no annual fees. And so that's a really important element of our model there that people should be aware of. The only quote-unquote commitment is the upfront commitment on what you're going to spend, which obviously happens on the back end, but all that money goes towards the actual titles that you want to acquire. And just a reminder for folks, EBA is a purchase-only model, at least as of October 9th, 2014. Let's flip over into the PDA mechanics. And again, I want to preface, we have not released our PDA program. I've been asked, though, by some of you even before this session to give you a little bit of information on what we're planning. I'm starting to see some questions come into that regard, which I'm happy to cover again at the end. There is, and I think it's pretty widely accepted from the competitors we've looked at and from those of you that are used to doing this with journals, ebooks, et cetera, there is a modest commitment up front that we will require. If I get the question, I'm happy to try to answer it, but at this point we have not actually set the exact price on what that's going to be yet. That's something that we're actually going to be finalizing in the final quarter here before our pilot launches. The other element to understand is that the customer within our PDA realm is going to have the ability, not necessarily to self-select, but through our account management team, our group that's responsible for helping to support and provide training to any of our customers, actually a relatively new group for us here, is that you can have a preference in terms of, do you want to set up, and we do intend, I should say this, I'll kind of go slow, our model intends to have a one-year streaming subscription option, a 3-year streaming subscription option, and a perpetual option. Now, I want to point out that that does vary by title. So we don't have rights in all cases to have a title be purchased perpetually. But we are one of the few folks in this space, and I believe we're the only one doing a video PDA model that even offers a purchase option, which is already getting a lot of fanfare from our customer base, the ones that we've kind of teased this out to a bit, if you will. And of course, you're all hearing about it today as well. I mentioned budget management. We are working through our development team and our technology, and again, we're building this internally. We're not outsourcing this. We're not trying to use someone else's software. We're building this for the needs of our business and our customers, and that's a really, really important thing for us. I think it's a huge value add to our customers. We're doing it this way. We're setting up a system whereby there'll be a spending cap. So at the beginning of your PDA term, you can actually set a cap limit. And forgive the consumer example, but I think it's something that we can all relate to. If you have a credit card, most credit card companies allow you to set a limit, and you'll receive some type of notification as you approach that limit. And the idea here is that you are able to monitor and manage your budget by getting a notification about a spending cap after you set it as part of the upfront process that we go through to get things ready to go for your PDA model. We are also working with the technology, and this is really, really important from all the feedback we gathered, that title level suppression and profiling is really important to make sure. I don't want to assume everyone knows what I'm speaking to there, but there are certain institutions, and there was a wonderful example, and forgive me, I won't mention her name, I forgot it actually, at AOA back in the winter in Philadelphia. We received wonderful feedback that there, in the ebook world, there were certain ebooks, and I won't use the exact name of the book, that the library would never, ever want to actually have purchased or subscribed to in that case. So we will be building that same level, title level suppression and profiling, so our customers can work with our account management folks to make sure that if there's something that you absolutely would never want to have be able to be triggered that you want to pay for, we can suppress those, limit those from the access level, so it's just not possible. And again, that comes back to managing the management, if you will, of making this successful for you. Here's where my numbers are mixed up, and this is what I said earlier. I did get to update this slide. It's unlimited access to video, so it's very similar to EBA. In the sense, though, that once you're turned on for the model, you get access. In this case, the initial launch, we're planning around 19 to 20,000 titles. It's unlimited simultaneous users, and again, the trigger does determine actually what gets subscribed to, what triggers a subscription, 1 year or 3 year, depending on the settings, or even up to the perpetual option. So again, I don't want to kind of go into all the nitty-gritty details. I can address questions on this at the end. We will be having more sessions, and we'll having more information available to customers that are interested in this model. I really want to continue to focus, though, on this as a concept that's something that's really coming available in the space for libraries. My last little section here kind of moves away from the models, and hopefully you felt that was a helpful recap. I just want to kind of stress in a couple minutes here really the importance of the platform. We hear this so often from customers, and I don't want to, there's no way am I disparaging competitive solutions. There's so much great technology happening in our space. I just want to kind of point out a couple of things that our customers have told us are so important to making any of these models successful. The number one, and if you're an Alexander Street customer, you're probably dozing off at this point. Hopefully not. But semantic facet browsing is so important to our customers, and that comes back to we're not just a provider of streaming content and multimedia. The real thing for us, and our customers tell us this every single day, if it can't be discovered, if it's not indexed, it can't be searched, it can't be browsed, it doesn't help drive usage, and it's not really helping the students and the faculty. So it's so important that semantic facet browsing, really the indexing behind that, is part of any technology, and that's something that we've invested so heavily in at Alexander Street. This slide, I won't read it to you, but some of the things that some other folks in this space don't necessarily have in all cases is HD compatible video. That's just so important. It's kind of laughable, the millennial generation in particular, the expectation, looking at a standard definition video, even if it's streaming, is like, what am I looking at? HD is really just the most basic of things at this point. And it's surprising how much and how difficult sometimes it is to even find other folks in the space that even offer HD video. More or less their platform is capable of providing at that level. Transcripts are one of those extra features that helps discoverability, it helps learning, it helps research. Ours just so happen to be synchronized alongside the video content. And the workflow tools. Our customers love creating playlists. They love making clips, sharing that with their classes, and certainly all of those things are possible in any of the models we discussed today. We're even going to be moving our single title streaming products in 2015 into our new interface that makes all of this possible. So whether you're an EBA customer, a PDA customer, these are things that are so important to us and that are available throughout the models. And of course, this almost is kind of a check-the-box slide, but just want to kind of emphasize, when we talk about technology, it's just so important also that not just that the interface that we're providing as a publisher and as a vendor works for you, but also that that works with the other discovery services you have, that there's the multiple languages, that we do the in-depth indexing, there's advanced search, it's the compliance with the usage stats, et cetera. One of the big things that we've invested so heavily in this year, if you're an EBA customer or a PDA customer in the future, you'll understand this, is really our administrative portal. So it's a place for the librarian. It's not for the student. It's not for the faculty member. It's a place for the librarian to go and manage what you have, to make certain settings if you're in a DDA type model, to make sure that certain things are set up to your preferences. And that's something else we're really investing heavily in, again, at the guidance of our customer base. So finally, we've gotten to that end part of questions, and I do see quite a few here on the screen. I'm going to go through those in no particular order, but as I'm going through those, we still have about 15 to 20 minutes left in our time block, so feel free to continue to add to that list. And hopefully everyone found value in the presentation, and we would love to continue the dialogue here with the Q&A session. So let's see what we have here. Our screen is cut off just a bit, so just bear with us while we open up the full question. Let me see here. Is there a way to... Yeah, the questions are just a bit cut off. There we go. We're opening up the screen a bit. One moment. A question here is what is ASP doing to ensure these video collections and titles are discoverable in discovery systems? Are you ensuring the metadata is updated and correct before sending to the vendors? Unfortunately, that question is a wonderful one. I am not on the technology side of our business. I can say as a member of our executive team that so many of our discussions with clients and internally as we do planning for our future years is addressing just those types of things. Discoverability is one of the... one of the highest priority thing for Alexander Street, and we'll continue to invest in that. And again, for those of you that are already customers, you kind of know indexing is a really core part of what we do and the metadata around that, and so that's a key piece of it. Yeah. And we do, my colleague here is reminding me, we do send data to all 5 of the major discovery services out there. So I think sorry there on the technology side, we're getting some movement on the questions. Let me see here. I think we have a question. Do you offer both popular and academic film titles? Yes, that's a wonderful question. We actually are investing pretty heavily in the film category as well. I kind of mentioned a bit earlier, and I think the question might have come in before that. We actually, one of our discipline channels, our discipline subscription channels, is film. That includes a kind of a wide variety of elements at this point, both Asian film. There's quite a few wonderful elements in there. Also the big acquisition we have this year, and we're so proud of, is the Criterion Collection. We actually just got rights to an additional set of films, so we have over 315 Criterion films, and I can't, unfortunately, at this point, share any more than that, but I can give you a little sneak peek that there are a couple in discussions with information providers that would be more in the popular category, not just on the academic side. So we're talking more about feature films. And again, I do excuse me, I'm not able to go into the details at this point since some of those discussions are in negotiation. Do you offer any options for consortial purchasing? We do. We haven't at this point really seen an interest or a way to make it work in terms of the DDA type model, so I'm referring to PDA and EBA. But we do have certain consortial organizations. It depends on the relationship. There's many factors to consider, so I can't make a blanket statement. But depending on the circumstances, primarily for collections, we do have some options in the consortial space for purchasing. And again, we're happy to take those questions offline, or feel free to contact us after the session if you'd like some more information on that. The next question here, what is the trigger for your PDA program number of minutes viewed? That's a wonderful question. I think I tried to convey that at this point we haven't made any concrete decisions exactly on what the magic number is going to be. I can tell you at this point, based on the guidance from our customers, is that we're focused on the number of playbacks, and we do anticipate that, yes, it will be more than one. So in essence, as a customer, as a library, there will need to be multiple triggers, so to speak, which really means that you get a couple free uses at a minimum before that title is either rolled into a one-year subscription, a 3-year subscription, or a perpetual purchase, depending on the settings and the rights, of course, that we have. So I don't have a concrete number in terms of how many playbacks, what that's going to be yet. We're going to set that probably in November or December, and we'll make that part of our pilot period for customers that are interested in participating. But I don't have a firm number yet. Let's see. The next question, I think, is, is there a minimum dollar commitment for EBA? Yes, there is. I didn't put concrete numbers up there, and I'd prefer that we maybe perhaps have a different discussion offline about some of those, the exact prices. But I will say that the minimum commitment to make for EBA is larger than $30,000, but there is a time-bound element to that. And so when you think about how much you might spend buying a collection, actually that price isn't that outrageous. But I want to kind of manage your expectations there, that the amount of the commitment is a driver of how long you get it. So if you fall in the lower category, you're not getting access to all those 40,000 titles for the entire year. You're getting them for a subset of that year, and the larger the commitment to make, the more time you have with those titles. It's not us being tricky, I can assure you. It really is driven by our IP relationships and making sure that we're offering things in line with what the customers, our partners, our information providers are comfortable with. So that's why there are some minimums to be mindful of. Let me see here. We have a question. Is the initial investment for EBA based on FTE or Carnegie classification? Are you working with consortia? Great question. I think I've kind of addressed part of that, but just to clarify, our EBA commitment levels are not, most of our pricing, I should say, is based on FTE. We also take into account your overall materials budget. That's one of the unique things about Alexander Street Press is that we're not just looking at the size, but also how your budgeting works. And that's always been a model that our customers have been very, very supportive of and very appreciative of. And so hopefully I'm answering the question there. On the EBA side of that, EBA, again, given the way it kind of works more like a single title model in terms of our licensing agreements. And so from that perspective, from an EBA perspective, there is no what I would call tiering, where the price unfortunately cannot and does not vary when it comes to FTE or your materials budget. And I think hopefully I've addressed kind of the consortial piece. We do have a number of relationships out there with consortia, also what we would call a network, and so there are different ways to acquire our content. At this point, our demand generation models are not running through those programs, but we do offer collections. We're even offering some of our bundles now through those groups, as well as our discipline subscriptions that we talked about. Another question here, when do you plan to launch the PDA model and how might we be involved in the pilot? Wonderful question. I think I mentioned it before, and sorry if I was rolling there too fast. We do plan to launch the PDA model as a pilot program in January. So I don't have a concrete date for you yet. My IT folks would kill me if I went out there and promised something at this point, but that is the target. We don't know at this point. I guess the scarier things for us is that everyone wants to be part of the pilot. I'm getting the impression from my initial client discussions and even today that I don't think we're going to have any problem filling our pilot slots. At this point, we have not confirmed how many slots we're going to have, but we don't think the pilot, it's not like if you're someone that isn't part of the pilot per se, and again, we haven't set criteria on how we're going to decide kind of who gets into the pilot, or it's probably going to be based largely on who wants to be, of course. It's not like the pilot period will lock you out. We still anticipate that the pilot is successful and we get good feedback from those initial pilot customers that the model will become available on a wider basis, not even a year later, well less than that. So we would anticipate something probably the latest in the summer that it'd be widely available to everyone, even if you missed the pilot, and hopefully maybe even sooner than that. So at this point, I'm sorry for that particular question about, I don't have a concrete date, but we're aiming for January for the launch of the pilot. If you are interested in kind of giving us a nod that you'd like to be part of the pilot, feel free to email me. My email address is there, or feel free to contact your sales manager. That's, I believe most of you know through your account if you're a current customer. So either way, just give us a shout, and we're happy to consider you once we get to that point. Okay, I think these are wonderful, wonderful questions. We have one more that just came in. Let me open that one up. I am confused about Insight Media, okay? That is a slightly different discussion. How are they moving onto the platform? Okay, wonderful question. I'll do my best to explain that. Late last year, Insight Media, for those of you that don't know, used to be a standalone organization. They are now part of the Alexander Street Press family. Primarily, they were a single title type of business, and our acquisition of that particular organization really helped us to get additional single title rights. At this point, and anyone that's familiar with some of the challenges with integration, we don't have full integration at this point. We are working towards the end of at some point in 2015, what we're working towards is if you buy a single title from us from a streaming capacity, is that's going to be available in the same interface if you bought a collection from us. So I can't promise a date. I technically can't even promise that we'll be able to do everything we want to do in that capacity next year, but the aim is that you'll see a lot more integration within the next year as we move forward from that. And feel free, I'll pause there. Hopefully, if the person that asked that question has any follow-up points I didn't cover, hopefully that kind of gives you a little bit of a insight, no pun intended, into what we're looking to do for next year. Great, perfect. Okay, we have a couple more minutes here. I'm happy to stay on the line and take any more questions. Feel free to type those into the box on your screen. I see a lot of thank yous. Appreciate that. Thank you all for joining. It's been wonderful to speak to you today. Hopefully you all found that helpful. Whether you thought it was great, bad, or indifferent, feel free to email me. I'm always interested in feedback from folks. Or if you prefer to ask a question offline, please don't hesitate. I think we have one more question here. Will we be able to get a copy of the PowerPoint? Yes, I don't have any problem with making sure that gets circulated. I doubt it will happen this week, but likely next week we'll find a way to distribute that to everybody if that's helpful. And I will stay on the line just for a few more minutes if you do want to kind of ask the question. Otherwise, it was, again, a pleasure to speak to everyone today. Feel free to ping me